Hey, welcome to my lab. We've got a fun challenge today. We're gonna roast coffee in a $20 popcorn popper that I actually found at Goodwill for $5. And my Mill City 500 gram roaster that new is $4,400. I did buy it secondhand, but I now use it to roast for my friends, family, and locals here in the Austin, Texas community. So if there's anything you can take away from this video, I would say most importantly, roasting coffee at home, if you've never tried it, is really inexpensive and it's a really fun hobby. Like I mentioned, a popcorn popper, brand new, is gonna run you $20 to $30, but really high quality coffees, unroasted, are about $5 to $7 a pound. So if you're drinking coffee all the time, paying for it at cafes when you could make it at home and roast it and brew it yourself, I highly recommend you try it. It's a ton of fun. It's a great way to experiment and learn. And it takes a few tries, but it's really not that difficult. So yeah, let's get started. If you've never seen unroasted coffee, it's actually a green seed from a cherry, and it's pretty much odorless and flavorless until it's roasted. Well, roasting with a popcorn popper is actually pretty straightforward. If you can get a mesh strainer that's metal to cool the beans really quickly, you just need a roaster or a popcorn popper to roast the beans, and then I'd recommend also some oven mitts as the base and top of this will heat up. Oh, and highly recommend you do this outside. As you'll see, when the coffee heats up, the chaff or skin actually comes off of the coffee. And also it doesn't smell really bad, but it definitely has a smell. So if you can do it outside, obviously it leaves the home a little bit cleaner and not smelling so much like coffee. So we've actually got an entirely separate video about how to roast with this, so I'm not gonna focus on it too much. But like I said, leave the heat on. I consistently shake it to ensure that the beans are evenly roasted. What I love about this is it's really inexpensive to do. This is about $1 worth of coffee. And if you find the sweet spot as you experiment for just $1 at a time at most, when you find a great roast, it will taste substantially better than anything like Folgers or K-Cups or standard coffee that you would buy off the shelf. So I highly recommend you try it at home. The coffee stays green or yellow for quite a while, and then it really quickly starts to turn brown and reaches first crack, and you'll actually audibly hear the pop when we get there. See if you can hear that. So as soon as the coffee reaches that profile that you like, drop it into your strainer and get as much air as possible into these beans. The beans themselves are actually cooking each other while they're still hot. So we try and get this air through, get them down to temp as quickly as possible. So really the biggest difference that we'll see between this popper and the industrial roaster, the industrial roaster takes a lot longer, but it does so in a way that we can cook the coffee really evenly and predictably. In a matter of about 30 seconds, this coffee went from a light roast to a medium to medium dark roast. And in the production roaster, if we're actually roasting correctly, that process takes about 2.5 to 3 minutes, maybe even more, and allows us to develop greater flavors and really target in on the perfect roast of the coffee bean.
A good analogy is like a DiGiorno pizza. If you think about it, the first maybe, let's say it cooks for 15 minutes in the oven, I don't know what it is, but the first 10 minutes, the pizza itself is not really edible. You're not really changing the flavor and the taste so much, versus the last 5 minutes, it's really up to you how long you want to take the pizza to, in this example, make it crispier or maybe pull it out a little bit earlier when it's doughier. In the same way with the coffee, what this allows us to do is bring the temperature of the beans up really uniformly in a consistent manner, like the first 10 minutes of that frozen pizza, and then we have the control and the power to develop the coffee for the last 5 minutes of the roast and really pull out the flavors that we want. By sensing it in real time with our tryer, this actually allows us to see and smell the coffee in real time. And over time, as we're working with these coffees, we find the perfect roast and the perfect flavors, and that's really kind of roasting in a nutshell. So we're about 3 degrees away from 385, so I'm gonna go ahead and load up the coffee. We're ready to go. Should be yellow to maybe showing a little bit of brown at this point. It's getting really dried out, so we've gone from that green bean to a nice yellow brown. From a smell, one of the things that you'll notice as it gets closer to brown is you actually start to smell a little bit of sweetness. So you go from kind of a grassy, grainy vibe of that green unroasted bean to kind of like a sugar cookie dough where you smell a little bit of sweetness, nothing overpowering, but you start to see the coffee kind of start to release its flavors, which is really amplified once we hit first crack. So we're getting really close to first crack. You can actually start to smell the coffee, smell more like actual coffee. Notice we're almost at what looks like a light roast, but we've got to hit that first crack. Notice too, I also removed this covering just because when that's not there, it's actually a lot easier to hear the first crack of it popping when all that moisture releases from the bean. There we go. Smell is much more vibrant now. Smells like coffee. Looks really great. We're almost there to a complete roast, but now we've got to develop it further. I'm also going to turn the fan on now in preparation of dropping. 3, 2, 1. Oh baby, that looks fantastic. The fan is doing a lot of work, but I'm also stirring to make sure that the same beans aren't touching each other for too long of a time to where they're transferring heat and cooking each other further. So we'll let the fan do its work, give it about maybe a minute more, and we've got some really great coffee. We'll show you the results here in just a second. So we've got our production roaster versus our popcorn popper, and you'll notice a few key differences. One thing, is pretty obvious. This one's a little bit darker than this roast, and that just speaks to how difficult it is with the popcorn popper to get the roast that you wanted. My goal was to get a little bit lighter, but I'm just not as used to roasting with that as I am with my production machine. So this got away from me, roasted a little bit too long. But also notice how shiny it is. With coffee, when you go to a medium and a darker roast, it actually secretes oil much more quickly. So this is actually oil from the coffee itself. So my fingers are actually pretty slick now. One last thing of note, again, there's no right or wrong answer with coffee necessarily. A light roast or a dark roast really just depends on the bean, but you'll notice the inconsistency of the roast here. We've got some beans with some burnt spots or burnt edges. This guy here from our popcorn popper got really nice and roasted, versus here we have an almost completely flush and uniform roast, and that's the main advantage of the industrial roaster.
So I appreciate if you've made it this far. In terms of the taste difference, again, you saw the difference in the roast profile, but the reality is, the popcorn popper coffee is going to taste good. Certainly better than Folgers, K-Cups, that kind of style of coffee. So again, I totally recommend you try it. But the difference with the inconsistent roast is that you kind of get a bland coffee. The beans are a little bit all over the place, as opposed to that consistent, really nice roast we saw from the production roaster. That coffee is going to be locked in. You're going to taste the exact profile of that coffee. It's going to be really strong because all the beans are putting out the exact same flavor. So if you made it this far, I really appreciate it. I do have an online store if you're ever interested in trying specialty coffee or buying some unroasted beans to try yourself. But in any case, thanks for making it this far, and we'll see you next time.